think it was about 3 years into the business. And at this point, I was severely overweight, incredibly unhealthy, dealing with everything I had done. And I just said, look, something has got to change. And so while I love the big picture, what's the one thing I can do right now in front of me? There's that leadership adage you always hear, you can't manage what you're not measuring. And I took that to heart. And I was like, I'm going to start to measure the crap out of everything. And that started to really flip my journey.
How do you turn personal tragedy into a powerhouse for business success? Today on Seek, Go, Create, the Leadership Journey, we welcome Matthew Sanjari, a trailblazing entrepreneur and coach who transformed his life after a near-fatal accident. Matthew is the visionary behind Prime Consulting, where he utilizes his 15 years of experience to mentor entrepreneurs through critical growth phases. His unique methodology not only focuses on scaling businesses, but also emphasizes personal development to lift clients into their full potential. Join us as Matthew shares his inspiring journey and invaluable insights on turning obstacles into opportunities for leadership and growth. Matthew, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Thanks for having me, Tim. I'm excited to have a great conversation today.
I'm excited about it too. Now, you mentioned, before we kind of get rolling here, you mentioned you just made a move. Tell everybody where you are and where you were from before you made that move, because it sounds like a big change.
Yeah. This has been the year of big changes. So I made my way on down. I'm in Orlando, so Central Florida. 6 months ago, I moved up from Canada, where I had lived practically my whole life, on and off different spots. But yeah, 6 months ago from Canada to Florida, leaving winter behind.
That's what I'm doing. Before we hit record, I told you I'm in Colorado Springs as of the time we're recording, and by the end of day, I'll be in New Mexico, working my way south for my wintering. Have the people in Orlando welcomed you with open arms, or they said, like, you darn Canadians, why do y'all keep coming down here? What's that been like?
For the most part, it's been with open arms, but I'm still getting way too many maple syrup jokes for my liking. And so I kind of lean into them now when I do business pitches. I don't have plaid on, I don't have maple syrup for you guys, but I do say hello from Canada.
Leaders, let me ask you a question. Are you driving your organization forward, or are you just reacting to the daily chaos? If you're feeling stuck in the weeds and struggling to focus on the big picture, it's time to shift gears. As a leader, your greatest strength is your ability to think strategically and proactively. That's what leading is. I specialize in helping leaders like you implement strategies that move your leadership and your organization from reactive to proactive. I'm offering a free coaching call to help you identify actionable strategies to become a more proactive and strategic leader. This call will give you clarity and direction. I guarantee it. Book your free coaching call now by hitting the book coaching call link in the show notes, or visit timwinders.com/coaching. Now, back to the show. Very good. All right. My first question, Matthew, was something like an icebreaker-y, what do you do? But I've recently made a shift. I'm going to give you a choice to answer my first kind of big question. I'm just going to give you the two questions, and you could say, I picked this one, and start answering it. The two questions are, what do you do, or who are you? Which question would you prefer to answer, and just go ahead and pick it and answer the question?
Okay, let's go with who are you? Because you know what? This is something I'm finding is evolving constantly, to my surprise. But to the question, who are you? I would say I'm someone who's a dreamer. I'm passionate about people. I've done a variety of things over the years. I'm a business coach now. I was a pastor. I've owned a marketing company, just a variety of things. And it really doesn't matter what the skin has been. I've realized that at the end of the day, I just want to see people reach their potential. And so who I am is dedicated to helping people build relationships, realize what's on their lives, and hopefully get to live it out.
So, something, especially on this podcast, because we kind of mash together business, leadership, and ministry, something that's going to perplex people right away is the fact that you were a pastor. Now you've gone out into the world of business and all of that money and all of that kind of stuff. So I think the first thing I'd like to know is I'd like to know a little bit more about Matthew the pastor and then the transition into something other than pastoring.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I loved it. Pastored on and off for almost 14 years. But in 2010, just a group of 8 of us in a living room decided to play to church. And went on this wild, exciting ride. But, I learned pretty quickly. Basically, on day 2, we're 8 people. This probably isn't going to sustain me. I need to go find work. And so found a corporate job that eventually led to my first round of entrepreneurship. And as I'm sure you could appreciate, I've just over the years realized there's so much synergy across both. But again, going back to the who am I, as a pastor, I absolutely loved being able to walk people through life. And, it's funny because, again, I see this now in my current iteration of work. As a pastor, I didn't need to be an expert. I just needed to be a great shepherd. I just needed to be a great friend. I just needed to be someone that was there, will help people zoom out or zoom in, depending on where they were, to point them to things that were bigger than me, to the person that actually matters. And so I loved pastoring. Didn't matter what hat I was wearing. I did worship, did creative arts, did some executive role things. At the end of the day, being able to work not just with people, but seeing them develop, on that leadership level and actually step into, and I know you appreciate this, but so many times, and I went through this journey myself, so many times seeing people kind of peek behind the curtain and realize, oh, the things that I was critiquing, now I'm in the kitchen. Now I'm making the food. This is a little different. And seeing people kind of go on that leadership journey, I loved it. And more than being on a stage, more than leading meetings, I think it was all just the relational time that we all spent together. It's the moments that nobody sees that I look back on and just think were these beautiful, profound moments. So, yeah.
Sure. Did you grow up in Canada? Is that where you grew up and spent most of your early years?
Born in Montreal, lived in Ottawa, went up to Bible college in Vancouver, but spent a lot of my time in Ottawa, central Canada.
Okay, because Montreal over to Vancouver, that's all over, that's spanning for those south of the border, we have no idea how far away those are. We think Canada is just, you cross over somewhere in Detroit and all of Canada is right there. So that Montreal is a long way from Vancouver, a long ways away. Did you grow up with the mindset or the heart or whatever you want to call it of, I'm going to go into ministry and be a pastor? Or what was Matthew like in his growing up years? After you got over there, you want to be a fireman or an astronaut or those type things. What was your desires of what you wanted to be growing up?
You know what? Funny enough, I was constantly oscillating. My parents had different ideas for me, but I was constantly oscillating between I either actually wanted to go into ministry, youth ministry, or I wanted to be a football coach. I love sports, love playing it, love the coaching side, love inspirational stories. The older I got, I really started to realize, wow, this idea of coaching or helping people reach their potential, obviously very passionate about it in a Christian context, in a ministry context. But I think even as a kid, I'd look at that and be like, as if a coach can sit there, like I'd watch basketball and Michael Jordan, like he's the greatest player alive. And even he is a coach, right? Even he's got someone who's drawn up plays, who's pulling him aside and saying, hey, make these adjustments.
So were you in a Christian home growing up? Were your parents, spiritual depth, churchgoers? How would you define the spiritual atmosphere of your home?
So to give people some context, love my parents. They're definitely on the crazy side. I grew up in this beautiful dichotomy where my father, to this day, is still an atheist. My parents are still married. My father's an atheist, smartest man, philosophy, logic, probably, in the political spectrum goes one way as far as he can. And then you have my mother, who on the other side flips the political side on the other side. And I don't think she met a plant she wasn't willing to pray for. And so I grew up in this dichotomy where my mother was like, I'm going to raise my family in the faith. And my dad said, that's wonderful. I'm just going to make him question it at every turn. And looking back, it's funny because when you zoom back, it's kind of messed up and feels like a recipe for disaster. But I look back and say the ability to question and the ability to wrestle with my faith at an early age, teenage years, young adult years, especially as I started to experience some personal tragedy, was so formative and has allowed me to help other people on those journeys where now hopefully people aren't afraid to question and they're not afraid to get into the messier areas of what leadership and ministry looks like. And so, yeah, my upbringing was such a dichotomy, a masterclass in diversity, but one that I'm really, really grateful for.
So, one thing that's fascinating about that, I actually don't think, I mean, obviously, I would pray for your father for salvation and all, but I don't think that's a bad thing that you were able to recognize a dichotomy. I've been studying a lot of Revelation recently, and that church that was so lukewarm, I think many families, they have this church going. I interviewed someone recently. They said, you know what, 52 days out of the year we were in church, that was it. There wasn't like this one way or the other. I think it actually would be healthy to have, this is what this looks like. And I'm holding my hands up for those that are listening in on the audio. The video, they say, oh, okay. And this is what this other looks like. Obviously, your mother was attempting to move you along a certain way, but at what point did your faith become your own and it wasn't maybe your mother's or something like that? When did you own it?
Yeah. I would say I had two distinct come to Jesus moments as how I would refer to them as. There was one
Good,
where
good reference. Good reference. You had come to Jesus.
I had one. The first one was the guy who really mentored me in a ministry, my pastor for many years. He basically sat me down and we had this conversation. He had a youth ministry at the time and he was attracting people that would never step foot otherwise into churches. And I remember going there, and one of the frustrations growing up for me is I was like, man, church feels so stuffy. I'm like, why is Christianity so stuffy? I had a really diverse upbringing, so my friendships mirrored that. I grew up with guys who were Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, and I'm like, this feels just as stuffy as them. Like, what's the difference? And I remember we'd have these long conversations over coffee till the wee hours of the morning. And I'd start to realize that maybe God is so much bigger than a laundry list of rules. Maybe there's much more than just the moral law of the 10 Commandments. And so that sent me down a journey where for the first time in my life, I started to get into the word and I started to read the Bible. And I didn't want to stab myself in the leg while reading it. It didn't feel like a chore anymore. And that first experience really set me down this path where I was like, okay, I'm getting a different picture of God that's no longer secondhand, it's firsthand. And it's starting to change and transform who I am.
And then we'll talk in just a moment because you obviously had a catalytic event occur with an accident. But there was one thing that you brought up that was so interesting. It's so kind of closer to my story. I would say my upbringing would be more, we kind of popped in and out of church and spiritual foundation. Because we grew up in the South, everyone just assumes they're a Christian. It's like, kind of like we are here. There's Bibles all around. There's churches all around. Therefore, we all are Christians. Obviously, that's not good theology right there. But I wanted to be, both my parents were educators. And Matthew, I wanted to be a coach and a teacher. So I felt like I was created to coach from an early age. The thing that kind of set me in a different direction was that I had a conversation with my parents at some point, late high school career, and I found out how much money they made. And it sort of changed a good bit for me. I said, you know what? I don't think I want to do that. I didn't realize we were poor. And so I don't want to be poor. And so I went after like engineering and went to Georgia Tech. But everything I did, I came back to coaching.
Really?
And so what I'm curious about, because you talked about ministry and coaching, talk about, compare those two, especially now that you've been a pastor, you've obviously been a coach, you've worked in ministry environments, you've worked in business environments. Talk about if there's contrasts, like differences, talk about what that is, but talk about the similarities because truthfully, I see a lot of similarities. So talk about those too.
Oh, you hit it on the head. I think there's so many similarities. And I was just having this conversation actually with someone the other day. To me, I view both of them as a coach, as a pastor. I view them as invitations to stewardship, right? Like I'm being entrusted with someone's life, someone's business, someone's journey. And, I didn't get to choose when they joined themselves to me or when I joined myself to them, right? That's the starting point. And sure, we'd all love, whether you're on social media or the books you read, we all want that linear journey. That's just not life. But how I respond during that journey with this person, with this entity, that's actually what matters, right? How we prepare each other, how we zoom out, how we talk through blind spots, how we prepare when no one's looking. These are the things that matter. In pastoring, it's the moments of having these conversations and walking people through the times that are neither hard nor good that'll impact how they then handle the hard and the good. And in coaching, especially on the business side, the leadership side, before you ever get on a platform, what does it look like on how you treat your team in the silos, in the quiet, right? And so I think I just see so many similarities, and they all come back to stewardship for me. And it's this idea that I try and pass on to people is, hey, as long as there's the grace for you to be in my life and for this to be in my life, how I treat this, how I steward this, how I handle this, I think says a lot about me and says a lot about the value I place on that thing.
Yeah, I think that's good. Stewardship is such a great word. And I love the contrast between stewardship and ownership because, as a pastor, truthfully, I don't think you own anything. And as definitely in the role that you play, you go in and you don't own any of that. You probably don't have ownership in companies, businesses. There's been times that I've had discussions about some ownership piece with what I do, but not really. We're just stewards, caretakers, overseers, trustees, whatever word you want to use. There's another word in, I'll call it church world, that's used a lot, but I don't know that it's understood. And that word is discipleship or discipling. Let's go ahead and throw that into the mix and talk about comparisons, contrasts, same thing, discipling, discipleship as it relates to coaching and that word that we use a lot in business, which is coach. Do you see any similarities there also?
Yeah, so many. I feel like people are going to think we rehearse this. No, this is actually just happening all on the fly. Right. On the discipleship side, I think it's a great word to use in this context because I think to myself, based on what I feel like the Bible said and the life that Jesus has modeled, discipleship is how do we equip people with the tools so they can best run the race set before them, right? And I think the same is true in leadership and in business. If we teach people, I'm all for frameworks. I'm all for guidelines. But if we try and force people into frameworks and guidelines, when something off the map or something that they can't handle gets thrown at them, a lot of times things blow up and people get erratic and they go off course. But when we equip them with the skills and we equip them with the tools, we put tools in their tool belt to say, hey, when this comes, right? I love how the Lord frames it, where it's like, in this world, there will be trouble, but take heart, for I've overcome the world. And I think in discipleship, it's this idea, hey, bad things are going to happen. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. You're going to be disappointed. You're probably going to experience failure. There's going to be rejection. I don't care if it's sports, ministry, business, life, relationships, whatever. So let's get really honest and start to equip each other with the tools. And that might be, why don't you get in your Bible, right? Why don't you get into some personal development? Why don't you get in prayer? Why don't you start to work on your communication? Why don't you get some accountability in your life? Again, there's parallels on either side, but how well we embrace those tools, I think that's what sets us up for the journey of discipleship.
The thing that I love, and I appreciate the passion when I ask that question for you. I like that. The thing that I've noticed is that in church world, they talk about discipleship, but they have difficulty with it because it's sometimes difficult standing in a pulpit, talking to 100, 200, 300. That's not necessarily discipling to me, but I am sure that today, yesterday, probably tomorrow, you were on phone calls, probably 30 minutes to an hour, maybe longer. And you'd probably do that monthly, if not weekly, with the same people. And it's really connecting. And I think you can't disciple, coach, influence, steward someone once a week, 45 minutes up on a stage. You might have some influence over them, but I think it's one of the closest things to discipleship that we have in our current culture. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I love that. I'd agree, right? Like, I think one thing that I really started to delve into is, there's a difference between information and revelation, right?
Mm.
And again, this transcends whether we're talking about church or the business world. It's like information. I can say, hey, this person is 6'4", they weigh 200 pounds, they've got a wingspan that's 70 inches. That's information. Revelation is when they punch me in the face and I feel the contact of that punch. That, like, that's impact. And so I can give a lot of information in these mass settings, just like you have, right? Speaking on stages. But that revelation, that coaching, that intimacy, that's actually born out of these smaller environments where we're able to make it personal and we're able to address things and just talk about things that actually connect. I love that word, connection. There's a connection between two individuals or, even in smaller groups. As impressive and sometimes needed as these big information gatherings are, I think these revelatory moments and these moments of discipleship have to happen up close because they involve relationship.
As you moved out of what we would call pastoring or ministry, it sounds like you recognized early on that to have full-time income in a ministry role was going to be challenging. Is that correct? Did I hear that earlier?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially just because, again, we plant it, right? Like, it's not like, I had thought about going the route of working at different churches, but we were young, dumb, and naive and had what we felt like was the call of God to do this. And so we did it.
Did you at all have this thought of, I'm gonna throw a word out I don't like to use, but I think most people understand it. Did you have a thought of failure when you decided to move away from a ministry role into a corporate role and then your own business and other things? Was there any like failure or darn or anything like that that crossed your mind?
Tim
Like you don't
Daly,
want to maybe tell your mom or anything like that?
Tim Daly, hourly,
Uh-huh.
actually. Yeah. And it feels a little stupid to think that, but I also think it's just reality. You know, Ministry, it's funny because, like, and I know you know this, and so many of your listeners know this, but it's like everything's ministry if we're honest with it, right? It's all ministry. But when we think of pastoral ministry, because it's an emotional investment that we're so tied to, I think the disconnect that of, oh, well, I'm not doing this full time. This isn't the thing that's putting food on my table can be really hard for a lot of people. And I know it was true for me, right? This idea that, like, oh man, my attention's divided. I have to do this because I need to put food on the table. But I just wish I was spending all of my time. I could be doing more. I could be talking to more people. I could be taking more people out for coffee. I could. And so, yeah, I feel like failure was definitely a thing for a long time. And the business, even early business success didn't mask that.
Interesting. So I want to fast forward briefly, and then I'm going to go back for a couple of things to fill in the gaps because we're heading towards you and I are going to have some fun shortly, just really talking about business strategy, leadership. So this is going to be some good content, but there's a couple of things about Matthew I want to know a little bit more about. I love the story and the journey here. And we go back and we talk about that failure or that time that you would have been in ministry in a church plant, which is like one of the highest echelons that in ministry world they elevate you and say, oh, you did church plant. That's like two notches below missionary in Africa and evangelist that travels the world and gets people saved, and then it's church planter. So you were there. But today, do you believe you're doing less than, as much as, or more ministry than you were doing then? Which one of those would it be? Less than, as much as, or more?
Yeah. And I think it's a great question. I think I would have answered this very differently at different points of my life. But right now, I would say as much as. Um, you and I talked about this earlier. I think for me, I've really stepped into this honest revelation from God where I am like, man, I've been called to people. I've been called to help steward relationships and help people reach their potential. It doesn't matter what the skin is. Doesn't matter, at the end of the day, God has very kindly changed the skin on me a few times over the last 14 years. But at the end of the day, I still get to have an impact. The methods have changed, but the message hasn't. And so to me, I would say just as much. And I'm not sure I would have been as honest with you over the course of the last 14 years.
Yeah, that's good. I agree with that. I had long discussions with people at Bible school that their measure of doing what God wants, and people have to go on their own journey, period. But I was a business guy. I was saved in a business setting. I've always been in the business arena and, have never been, in truth, kind of like you, I always felt churches were a bit stuffy. I don't really enjoy going in our traditional church settings. Give me a business setting where I'm facilitating a leadership group. And man, that's church for me. I love that. So, all right, Matthew, I'm a firm believer that there's two ways that people make significant change in their lives. One is we hire a coach, we focus, we come up with a plan, we go through a methodical change process to do something different. Or, and I think this is the more common one, some catalytic event occurs and it literally a 2x4 or a car accident or a financial collapse in my situation changes everything about who we are. Sounds like there was quite a catalytic event in your life that occurred, I think it was 12 plus years ago, something like that. Tell me about that. And did it have that change that I'm talking about? Or if it didn't, that's fine. But tell me about that and what occurred there.
Oh, listen, it did. It had the Hollywood movie effect that I think I could have never imagined. 12 years ago, I was driving. At the time, I think I was 23 years old. I was driving home late at night from a girl I was dating. I was driving home from her house. I think it was like 11 p.m. at night in country road, and two horses jump out onto the road at the last second. Yeah,
Jeez.
horses. And I don't know if you know horses. I did not. I know now, but it was two Clydesdales, and I couldn't stop. They were joined, and I slammed on the brakes last second, absolutely totaled my car. One of the horses fell onto the car, absolutely crushed it, like the car crumbled. And when the proverbial and literal dust settled and the car had spun a few times, I realized it's dark at night. The windshield, like 3 inches is what they measured, and I would have been toast. And I basically broke out the car door because the frame had bent, knocked on the door of the closest house. Again, we're in the country, so we're talking a mile between every house, and ended up making my way to the hospital. I tell everybody, I did what every young, dumb, naive 20-something-year-old male does, where they give it a few days and they say, nothing's wrong with me. Everything's fine. Turns out as days turn to weeks and weeks turn to months, that everything wasn't fine. I actually got diagnosed with multiple disabilities, some cognitive, that truthfully still affect me to this day. That led me to this place where within a few short months, I was no longer working. I had to take a break from church and serving and being on staff. And it felt like the extrovert in me didn't want to see people. And I found myself in this place that I didn't want to do anything. Found myself in bed, depressed. And a year out, I basically be a completely different human than what I feel like I had signed up for to be my lot in life.
And so what were the results of that? You couldn't do certain things. And what of your life trajectory changed due to an unfortunate event? I've got to ask this too. I'm pretty confident the horses didn't come out of that situation very well either, correct?
No, no, they didn't. Yeah, yeah. Instant on impact. Hmm. And as for life changes, again, everything without exaggerating, everything ground to a halt. Right. I had to leave my job because the headaches and the pain just got so bad that I actually couldn't stay. I was calling in sick all the time, and so I found myself depressed, in bed, not seeing people. All things just the antithesis of me. And I found myself angry at God, like, what the heck? Here I am starting a promising career in two different fields, loving my life. I'm in my early 20s. I'm getting opportunities. It feels like I have the world's my oyster. I have the whole canvas ahead of me. And truthfully, everything just ground to a halt for about a year.
And so what brought you out of it, snapped you out of it, led you out of it? What did you do? What did others do? Let's talk about that journey beyond that, because it's my belief. I don't think it's a car accident. I don't know if it's financial collapse like we went through, but I think everyone has to go through stuff. And I think we find out what people are made of, or who they are, or where their faith is, or whatever. We could throw a lot of words in there when those situations occur. So talk about the journey after that year and moving beyond that.
Yeah. So, about a year in, and this is the kindness of God. I can say this over every aspect of my story that we'll cover today. Every aspect, I can just see the kindness of God woven through it. And I had a friend reach out about a year in and said, "Hey, I work at a pool company. They make custom pools. They need some help with some computer stuff. And, my dad worked in IT. He said, can you come help us?" And I was like, well, that's my dad's thing. And he's like, no, can you come help us? And he was just throwing me a bone. He was like, they're going to pay you cash. Just take the job. Just get out of the house. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And, I went out there. Business owner comes and talks to me, and he starts asking me some really random questions. We just hit it off. And, within a matter of time, he said, hey, like, what do you think of our website? And, he pulls it up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this website's awful. In my head, I'm like, well, I can't tell him this. I just met this man. I'm like, he's going to ask me to go home right now. And he just kept pushing. He's like, no, no, be honest. I'm like, if I'm honest, I'm like, I wouldn't do this. I think this looks terrible. And he said, what can you do better? And I was like, probably. And he said, okay, well, let's try it. And I walked out of there, Tim, with my first marketing client. Didn't go to school for marketing, had no marketing experience, had never worked a marketing job. And looking back, it was just the Lord being like, hey, here's your shot. Here you go. And I used that money for my first client to teach myself marketing. And that was the day my marketing company was born. And I would love to end the story there and say that it was a happy ending and everything was great. Truth is, for the next 3 years, business was awful. Because as kind as the Lord was to provide that initial start, I came into this reckoning where I realized that everything I knew about leadership in business was really one-sided, right? I was a great face. I could communicate well. I was an A-type, big ideas, but I had zero life experience. I'm like, I actually didn't know anything about the details. I never really proven any of the things I had talked about in settings, which is shocking because, I think a lot of people think, oh, if you speak from a platform, you've lived this. I didn't, was way too young still. And I basically, for those first 3 years, as quick as I got a client, I'd lose it. There was no systems, no strategy, no structure. And if you're talking turning point quickly, I remember looking myself in the mirror in 2016, I think it was, about 3 years into the business. And at this point, I was severely overweight, incredibly unhealthy, dealing with everything I had done. And I just said, look, something has got to change. And so while I love the big picture, what's the one thing I can do right now in front of me? There's that leadership adage you always hear, you can't manage what you're not measuring. And I took that to heart. And I was like, I'm going to start to measure the crap out of everything. And that started to really flip my journey.
So would you say, I mean, one of the things that I know you address, I address this also with leaders, is I attempt to see what their mindset is like, because often that can ripple throughout an organization. What was your mindset at this time? I'm going to throw a few words out and then you could either agree, disagree, or pick them apart. But I mean, when someone's gone through stuff, even though they could be attempting to be optimistic, there could be a victim type mindset and a poor, pitiful me, or blaming, or mad at God that earlier, or things like that. And if we look back on it, we think we should have been more successful, but then we realize, no, I shouldn't have been, because my mindset or something like that. What was your mindset like during that 3 years you said that was still challenging post at least getting business going?
Yeah, this is such a good question. I To speak to that victimhood, I literally looked at this accident, anything associated with, as having robbed my life. It ruined my life. It took everything from me. And for the first year or two, there was a lot of people who agreed. They're like, oh, yes, that's awful, as if that happened to you. And then I found myself now surrounded by, God bless them, people and opinions and my own internal thoughts that were just echoing this chamber of, yeah, you're a victim. And I sat there for years, from 2012 to about 2016, blaming my pain for the reason why I wasn't living up to my potential or walking out my purpose, only to realize that it wasn't my pain that was doing that. It was my perspective. And when I dialed in and actually, more than a nice motto, figured out what that perspective was, I really think that that was the shift for me in every area of my life, not just my business.
And one of the things, I think this is important. I think it's in Matthew 7, towards the tail end of the Sermon on the Mount. Very significant that I'm interviewing Matthew here and I'm quoting Matthew 7. I'm not going to quote it, I'm going to give the reference. Jesus says that the rains come, the storms come for those that are built on sand, for those houses that are built on sand. And also the rains come and the storms come for those that it's built on a foundation. You had, there was a spiritual foundation there that was underneath that mindset and that victim. How, when did that rear its head up and start taking over and start getting you back on track of where you kind of started transitioning from, okay, I'm not a victim, I'm a victor. I'm operating in the kingdom of God, not in the Babylonian system or the world system. And because I'm guessing a lot of the situation, some of the pain, all that stuff probably didn't change. It's between the years is what's changed, or maybe the soul. So just tell me more about that before we get into, I want to go strategy, but this is good stuff right here. This is foundational.
I mean, full disclosure, it's 12 years since the accident and I still live with that pain. I woke up this morning with some of that pain. So you're right, it hasn't gone away. But I remember this, I just said the whole perspective shift. We're having this conversation with someone at church and we're having coffee, just having this great conversation. And this person starts to open up about chronic pain. They start to open up about some really serious things that they had been battling. And I'm sitting here shocked because I'm like, this person is pretty well known in our church. You know, they hadn't really, to my knowledge, ever voiced that. And so I started to say, hey, you know, why me? Why are you sharing this with me? And what's made you comfortable enough to share? And they went, because when you share your struggle, Matt, and I see you keep showing up to things like this coffee, and I still see you, you know, playing keys at church or talking, it, it pushes me that there's hope for me. And I remember going home and crying my eyes out, Tim, because I thought to myself, I'm like, if this person, I'm like, first off, I don't have half the hope this person does. But if they can pull from the mess that I am right now, and they can choose in the midst of what I thought was an awful situation they were disclosing to me, like, I wonder if there's some perspective to be had here. I wonder how much of this is like me in my head. And obviously things didn't switch overnight, but that was such a catalyst for me, seeing someone be able to draw these beautiful conclusions from what I felt was like this absolute mess of a life at the time.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm sure that not only there was physical stuff, I'm guessing things like that, wreck our finances and those things are challenged. But 2016, there's things started to change. Obviously, you started getting more business. You had your company, and then you have now moved into coaching. I think you exited your company. Let's start now talking about what all that was like. What are some of the success keys that you learned along the way there that we could learn from? So let's go to 2016 on. Tell me what we need to know about that.
Yeah. So, you know what? Let me, if it's okay with you, I'm going to paint the dichotomy. You asked me at the beginning two questions and I answered the second, but let's answer the first one quickly. So, I'm both a business coach and a business consultant. And so to me, the dichotomy of the two is really important because I function as a hybrid. And that's important because as a coach, I feel like I'm there with the entrepreneur. We're talking high level problem solving. What are the things that are ailing you? Can I help you zoom out? And as I started to do that, I started to realize there was a real disconnect. Full disclosure, I'm sure you can appreciate this. I never wanted to use the title coach because in my mind, I had this judgment that I was like, there's a million coaches on social media. Lord knows if 99% of them or even I'm qualified, but it fits, right? You're coaching people. So I'm like, what else is there? But I started to realize as I worked with people, there was a disconnect on the implementation. It didn't matter how good our strategy was, how good our sessions were. If you weren't taking this back to your team or your business. And so the consultant side of me said, well, we need this. And rather than this just be a good idea, that was the key to me unlocking the success in my own business, in my own life, realizing, look, I've been an A-type, problem-solving, strategic guy my whole life. That's wonderful, but I'm a one-man shop right now. So I've got to do the work and I've actually got to put the effort in. And so I learned what it meant to build systems and structures and things that I previously didn't care about. And so going on that journey for me led me to this from a leadership perspective. I said, look, I've read all these books, 80-20 rule, all this stuff, Pareto principle. What can I apply to me? So I started to go of the mindset that I said, look, I'm an A-type. I'm a visionary. I'm a sales guy. So I'm going to fill my capacity to 100%. I'm going to go until I feel like the absolute stress. And then when I get there and I can feel the tension, I'm going to start to delegate. I'm going to start to offload. And, now I know that as my framework, the automate, delegate, eliminate that I use with my clients. But my goal in the beginning was the realization is if I took myself from 100 to 70%, well, I just bought back 30% of my time. And so once I brought somebody else on, I was doing that and I was like, oh, I just freed up 30%. What am I going to do? I'm going to focus on the things that I know how to do. I know how to sell. I know how to talk to people. I know how to create a good culture and treat my employees well. Fill myself up to 100. Oh, we reached the capacity. Start. And whether it was automation and figuring out technology stacks and some of the cool things, AI, or delegation, actually figuring out, okay, what are the things, not just delegating tasks, responsibilities, elimination. Am I doing redundant things? All of these things started to put me down this path, Tim, over and over again. I started to build something that was scalable, that was not just reliant on me anymore. And that's kind of what I've carried into what I'm doing now.
I guess one of the things I'd love to know, we don't shy away from, like we talk about the mature topics here. Where did you personally start seeing, I guess, let's say financial reward? That's not our ultimate measure of success, but it's like where you looked around and said, okay, this is working. Where was that time frame? 16, 17, 18, yesterday? I don't know. Whenever, when would you say, man, okay, this is working, the systems are working, and I'm gaining financial reward for it?
Yeah, 2017. 2017 was the moment where I felt the shift. And it was that exact thing where the first time I went, look, if I measure my capacity from 0 to 100 and I'm at 100, this is great. But now I'm capped because everything's reliant on me, on my labor. So when I did that first offloading without even realizing it, again, it sounds so good on paper, but it hadn't hit my head yet when I realized, wait, I've now brought somebody on. I can go generate more revenue. Wait, this is amazing. And it actually became addictive to me. And it's something that for me unlocked in business, but also unlocked in leadership, because now from a church perspective, I was like, wait, I had routinely I'm like, okay, we've got 4 leaders. You get this, you get this, you get this, you get this. And, we had survived, but it never felt like we were harnessing momentum. Now, when I applied that same logic, I was like, wait, what would it look like to now help people build a third level of leadership where as they get filled up, they start to bring somebody on. And so to me, that was the real shift in my leadership and in my financial, when I realized that I'm capped. I have a capacity. I have an emotional capacity, physical capacity, all the capacities. And the key is how well I'm able to leverage the things in my life so that I can keep focusing on the things that I feel like God has equipped me to do.
Sure. Are you working primarily with, we'll call them for-profit companies? You mentioned church just then, because one thing that is somewhat aggravating to me at times is how church structures don't use some of the things like automate, delegate, eliminate. They think in different terms. And listen, there is a spiritual component, I know, and there's some differences there. But do you work all for with for profit, or do you do anything in the nonprofit arena also, or the church world?
Yeah, not in the church world right now per se, but I do have some nonprofit clients because again, and I'm sure you can appreciate this to me, and this is just my opinion. So hopefully nobody sends you any nasty emails, but I'm just of the opinion that I think sometimes we over spiritualize things. I think that this is a God given principle. Again, the message can remain the same, the skin can change, but the message at the end of the day is like, hey, is this going to help us pastor people better? Is this going to help us lead people into a deeper relationship with Jesus? Is this going to give people the skills and talents and unlock the things in their life to live healthier marriages, better lives, more God given and God purposed lives? Then yeah, let's do it. Even if that's as simple as sending out a scheduling request and, starting to automate some of these, introducing some software, you know, in our lives, it would be inexcusable, I think, for many of us that are listening to ever say, well, we've always done it this way. Yet that's the exact same thing I hear time and time again. I'm sure you have in churches and in ministry.
Yeah, yeah, we've always done it this way. I am so non-traditional. It truly annoys quite a bit of people around me. So much so that even, we're recording this, we're about to be in the holiday season of Thanksgiving, Christmas. I am like so non-traditional when it comes to that stuff. My family does kind of get a little bit annoyed at it, truthfully, but it's just the way I push the envelope and all that. So tell me, give me some profiles of the type people that you work with that you feel like you are jamming, you're rocking with them, and it is really working. Either size companies, size organizations, things that are going on, things like that. Just tell me more about the type people you work with.
Okay. So I asked two questions that I think really delve into who my ideal client is, who the people I love working with is. So the first question is a bit jarring for a lot of people, but the first question is, hey, heaven forbid, if you got knocked out of your business or your church or your leadership for 30 days and you had no contact, right? No plan, no contact, heaven forbid it happened. What would you come back to? What kind of finances would you come back to? What kind of team would you come back to? What kind of clients would you come back to? And everybody always has this, like, I see this like awkward laugh and they just go pale. And for me, I go, hey, I know that's uncomfortable, but this is a really good revealing question. It may hurt a little bit because you go, oh, maybe I don't have a business. Maybe I have a job because if I don't show up to my job, I don't get paid, right? Or maybe my leadership is really not that much of leadership and more management, right? It's revealing, but it helps me unveil, hey, well, now we know the areas to work on. How do we build something where you get to actually function as an executive, function as a pastor, function as a leader? That's that first question. And I think the second question, you actually touched on this earlier, and I was like, again, disclaimer, we did not plan this, but I asked the question, if money, you're not allowed to use a number. What does success look like for you? And taking a number off the table paralyzes people. They sit there and they're like, oh, well, I was going to say $1 million. I was going to say 500 people in a room. And I said, hey, can't, numbers off the table. And so then, with some probing, they start to get into the why. And the why oftentimes is, I want to have financial freedom. I want to have time freedom. I want to see healthy marriages happen. I want to see the next generation raised up in our church or in our business. And I go, there we go. That's the thing. And now that you know that thing, why are you building the way that you're building? You tell me that you want to spend time with your family, but you're answering emails at 9 p.m. And so those two questions, Tim, they help me unlock so much of that client profile because at the end of the day, it is fairly generic, right? As long as you got 3 people and you do $500,000 in revenue, we're technically a good fit on paper. But how you respond to those two questions really gives me perspective into the kind of person that I'm talking to, the kind of outlook that they have, and really some perspective into where they're at on their journey. And truthfully, if I can be helpful to them or not.
Yeah. Has it taken a while for you to evolve to those two questions that narrow it down? My guess is you probably worked with some people that wouldn't have answered those questions well early on. I have. I mean, we made it. I made it work. It was enjoyable, all that kind of stuff. But how have you evolved into those questions?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I absolutely started working with people in the beginning that looking back, I'm like, they did not fit this ideal client profiles. And I think that that's come out of this place where, again, it's the struggle I said of I didn't want to be a coach or a consultant. I definitely didn't choose to go down this road originally. But how I found myself here was realizing, oh, wait, I have done this over and over again. I've done this in ministry. I've done it starting the marketing company. I've done it with a real estate company. And so now I find myself not having to spout theory to people, but getting to tell people, hey, this is what I've done that's worked. Are you willing to consider it when it comes to systems, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to structure? And so again, to loop that back, it's allowed me to now evolve into those questions because I look back and go, oh man, I was solving the answer to these two my entire life. I still am. I'm still evolving. So
Yeah. And Matthew, this is people ask me this a lot, so I'm going to ask you this. People feel as if their situation is always unique. It's like I know you've never. This is I'm going to be a little bit snarky here. I know you've never seen this before, but we've got some conflict on our leadership team, and Joe is not getting along with Sally, and we can't figure out what's going on, blah, blah, blah. So just things like that. So, but yet I have found that most things are fairly common, and not everything fits, but what are some two, three, four, I don't know, whatever it is, what are some things that you see when you're invited in after you ask those questions and you raise that hood up and you look down in that engine or the organization, whatever metaphor you want to use? What are some things you see in almost every organization?
yeah. So just to shoot that start back, there is nothing new under the sun. Okay. There is nothing new. You're not a surprise to the Lord. It may be new information to me, but it's not a surprise to him. But I think to answer that, some of the biggest things that I've seen and come across that I'm constantly addressing both in my life and in for my clients and the people that I try and help, is again I love to ask the question, hey, are you focused on growth or are you focused on health? Because healthy things grow. And oftentimes when we focus on growth, it's at the expense of health, right? And nobody looks at a plant and yells at the plant and says, why aren't you growing? No, we water it. We make sure it has great soil. We adjust it, put it in the right sunlight. And if we put it in the right conditions, then it will grow. Right. And so I think that that's always a big one. I like to use it in my bio often. I tell people, you can build business and then build people. But I promise you, even with the advent of AI and all the technological advances, if you build people, they will build business. And again, can't just be a great motto, can't be a great slogan, because if you want to build something that holds up to my first question, you probably want to invest in people. And I'm so fortunate that I have a bunch of clients that are investing in leadership pipelines and developing people. Um, and I think if I could rapid fire another one at you, I think the two is one and one is none is gold. Um, you may have been the entrepreneur, you may be the chief decision maker, you may think you're the smartest guy in the room. You don't want to be. And the sooner that you can bring someone else on that journey, and you can start to transfer not just the tasks, but some of the responsibility and the authority. Because if you just hand off tasks, again, if something were to happen, then that person isn't equipped or empowered to actually make decisions. They're just equipped to check boxes on a to-do list. And so two is one and one is none, simply meaning, hey, if you have somebody that you're constantly mentoring and raising up and pouring into and showing, then you always have one person. But if just you, there's actually nobody there in case anything happens.
Yeah, the way I word that is that we're trying to purge that, if it is to be, it's up to me mindset that probably got them to the success point that they're at, but now it's hindering them to get to the next place. And I've had it. You've probably had it. We all, achievers have a heavy dose of, if it is to be, it's up to me. But I love the automate, delegate, and eliminate system that you talk about, because I think it's a way that people can check themselves. So when you step into an organization, what is some of the first things you look to do or to identify or to find or to snoop around or whatever words you want to use? Give somebody like if they're working with you and Matthew shows up virtually or in person, what's one of the first things that you like to do when you step into an organization?
Yeah. So, assuming that we've gone through the two questions, because I
Yeah, yeah.
always do that, I walk people through my 4 Ps, and those are purpose, predictability, profitability, and productivity. And the reason why I do that is I ask people, hey, like, what's important to you? And I mean, listen, Tim, you know the answer to this. Everybody always says profitability, right? But like, we're in business, right? Even if it's a nonprofit or a church, like, hey, we have to keep the lights on. And I go, that's the least important of the 4 Ps. So that's actually the last thing we're going to work on. Because if you find your purpose, and I'm not talking we use the owner, I'm talking about if I go ask all the team members, hey guys, what's the reason we exist? And if they're not all aligned, which spoiler, they never are. If they're not all aligned, then we're actually not
Yeah.
operating to the same framework. And finding that purpose then allows us, takes me to the next step where I go, hey, how are we doing with productivity? Right? Are we actually operating at the levels that we want to? Are we wasting time, wasting energy? Are people happy? That's again the automate, eliminate, delegate. That's such a great framework to assess our productivity. Then that gets us into our predictability, right? And predictability is our ability to actually measure how well our systems are responding. Can we turn this on and off? Can someone take a vacation? Predictability isn't just I run a marketing campaign and I get leads. And if we built a business that is built on purpose, that is productive and predictable, it's only a matter of time before our profitability increases. And I like to explain profitability, and I really challenge people on this. I say profitability is not my income minus my expenses equals my profitability. I just had a conversation with a newer client. She's profitable until I peeked under the hood and found out that 60% of her clients lose her money. And I was like, it's a miracle you're profitable, but imagine the $15,000 a month you're leaving on the table with those 60%. And she had no idea. Right. And so profitability is far greater than what's left over. It's what's working for us. 80-20 rule. How are we making our money? Right. What are the most leveraging tasks for us for the nonprofit? They're putting all this effort into this donation, that donation. Turns out they have a corporate match program where people could give $1,000 and their company will donate $1,000. Guys, we could just double all of our revenue in one shot. And they sat there and they were like, why aren't we putting all of our time into this? And I was like, exactly. You just answered your own question. So yeah, those 4 Ps, I find it helpful to lay it out. And again, just to gauge where people are at, because almost always people go, profitability, let's talk about that one. And I go, yeah, that's the one we're going to hit to last. And it's only a matter of time before we get there.
So when you going to write a book on Matthew's 4 Ps? When's the book coming?
Uh, I don't know. Honestly, I've got a bit of imposter syndrome, full disclosure, where some days I'm like, yeah, let's write it. And some days I'm like, I still don't know if I'm qualified to do this. So I'm sure at some point I'll get on the horse because, if I can help people through that writing medium, I'm down. But yeah, it's a journey.
Sure. Hey, Matthew, give me, that was sort of a success story you just gave, but just something off the top of your head, a success story with a client that is just going to be helpful to the listener that goes, ooh, I like the sound of that. What's something that jumps to your head when I ask for a success story?
Yeah. My second client, that I signed on the consulting and coaching side when I went down this road a few years ago, um, in the health and fitness space, she's incredible, had been an entrepreneur for a decade plus, and had achieved some measure of success. The hard part is that the entire thing was built on her, and she had never taken a vacation. I'm talking, she had not gone a full week away from the business. And this business was run 360 out of 365 every year. And so I asked her, I said, why haven't you taken one? It's really important that you get out. You say that time is so important to you and your family and your friendships. And she goes, well, I'm scared. I'm scared of what will happen if I leave. And so, obviously we talked through her fears and, we really boiled it down to she was afraid because she hadn't transferred enough responsibility over to her team just tasks. So she was afraid that when she left, if the place burned down, they were done. And the beautiful thing about going on the journey, with both her and her operations manager, again, that coaching and the consulting, is that she literally within a few months was able to take her first vacation. We had multiple check-ins during her vacation where I was like, hey, just so you know, place hasn't burned down. You're still fine. And she came back, and it was so cool because her team not only stepped up, they for the first time got to realize what they were capable of, right? Because even though she's an incredible owner, she didn't realize that she was capping their leadership. She was always there to save them, always there to rescue them. And now we had this beautiful thing where everybody's sitting here realizing the possibilities. And that's when we really got to go to work. And here we are, almost 2 years into that journey. And I have to tell her to stop taking vacations. It's gone a little too far now. I always be like, hey, dial it back. But it's beautiful. And, she's the one I alluded to earlier. She's building a leadership pipeline. They used to hire external managers, and it was creating this chasm with the employees that she wasn't even aware of. Now their last 3 management promotions have all been internal, and people are excited and they're showing ownership because they're seeing that they can potentially live out their dreams within her company. And she's operating at a level that she always wanted, was as a high level leader.
I love it. I love it when someone moves from that manager task person to what I believe a leader really is. And man, that's awesome that you're leading and guiding people into that area. Hey, Matthew, if someone wants to connect with you, get more information, maybe have you ask them those questions you mentioned earlier, where can people find you?
Yeah, I love connecting with people. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Matthew Sanjari, Sanjari, or you can go to my website, consultingbyprime.com. That's consultingbyprime.com. I'd love to connect with you.
Awesome. We are Seek, Go, Create, Matthew. Those 3 words. Going to allow you to choose one of those as my final question. Seek, go, or create, and why?
Yeah. I'm going to say, and both selfishly and unselfishly, I'm going to say seek. And when I think of seek, I think, man, go seek out someone who knows what you don't know, right? The old adage is you don't know what you don't know. And I think that that's so true. I think surrounding myself personally with people who are so much better than me, smarter than me, wiser than me in so many different areas, we all get to play a part, but it has been so good for me because it doesn't matter how smart I think I am or how much success I get. There's just someone out there who's going to challenge my perspective and allow me to view things in a different way. And so, whether that's a coach, whether that's a consultant, whether that's a pastor, surround yourself with people, seek that out and try and get people that'll challenge your perspective and help cover your blind spots.
Excellent. Love it. Matthew, thanks for joining us here. This has been a great conversation. Like you said, it may look as if we were scripted, but we were just syncing, man. It was just like we were on the same page, sending out the vibes here over the waves. Man, I appreciate you being here. If you feel that Matthew said something that resonated with you or you want to connect, I encourage you to reach out. I mean, both of us are coaches, but listen, you need to find someone that you connect with. And it may not be me, it might be Matthew. And I think he would probably say the same thing. It's like, find someone, seek, as he used that word, seek someone that can help lead and guide you. And I'm convinced that Matthew's a guy that can lead a bunch of you that are listening in. So reach out to him. We have new episodes here at Seek, Go, Create every Monday. We're on YouTube. We're on all the platforms. And I want to make a quick shout out. Thank you so much to the people that have been supporting us financially. We put this link up, seekgocreate.com/support. And I get tips that keep showing up, $50, $75, just people saying we support you. Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Keep doing it. I'll accept it and receive it. So I appreciate you listening in. Until next time, continue being all that you were created to be.